for you. Do a restart on that?
We could go ahead. We'll do the roll call.
Okay, so roll call, John Haveman, sorry.
Here.
Okay. Caleb McWaters.
Here.
Tracy Broadman.
Here.
And Stephen Roth.
Here.
I believe everyone is present. Any other members I'm not aware of who are not here?
You're good to go.
So, first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was December 17th, 2024. I think everyone should have a copy of those minutes. Someone like to suggest approval?
I move we approve.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Do we need to?
We probably should take just a roll call. It's sort of perfunctory.
Okay. Okay, so
We'll just also note for the record that there are, I think, 3 members here who were at the meeting. So for purposes of approving the minutes, it's fine if everybody wants to vote, or even if the 3 members who were here who can vouch for the minutes vote either way.
okay, let's just do members who were here for that meeting. I approve the minutes.
Vote to approve.
Approve. Okay, and I'll record the other 2 members as just abstaining if it's okay with you.
Abstain.
Okay.
All right, next item on the agenda, do we have any awards recognitions, presentations, or introductions? And I think we do have an introduction of new member, but any other items here, awards, recognitions, or presentations?
You can just cover, yeah, we do have a new committee member, Mr. Hagan, joining us, appointed by the council, filling the term that expired where
Karsten.
Karsten Anderson. So welcome.
You.
Want to introduce yourself? You kind of did already informally, or you're good. I will also take the opportunity to introduce Alexis Bailey, who joined our office. Has it been like
Almost a year.
almost a year ago? January-ish,
December.
Yeah, who's counting? She's a senior management analyst. Has been with us and helping out, and also put this package together. He's supporting Sean and I for all of the work that we bring forward to this body. So glad she was able to join us.
We look forward to working with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Great.
Is there anyone online in terms of an audience? I don't think there's anyone in
Did not
present.
see anybody, actually, yeah, so the public comments for now are required, are limited to members of the public who would be at the meeting in person. Technology is there for folks to listen in and watch the proceedings, and then we archive it. I can't cite the chapter and verse, but there was a piece of legislation passed that's starting, I believe, in July. To be taking public comment also virtually.
Okay.
That'll transition with time. Well, absent that, we can move on to matters before the committee.
Okay, not sure how best to review the City Council Subcommittee feedback on our annual report.
Yeah, I can give a little summary.
Sure.
And synopsis of it. I probably, I included a lot of material in the packet just for kind of the audit trail. But this item, I apologize because I think I probably provided some feedback informally, but the committee members may recall that at the December meeting, we had a robust discussion about the annual report that the committee is required to transmit to the city council. After some discussion, and particularly of the issues or questions that came up in the committee's discussion, where we landed was that the official committee report was sort of that standard template, of, having to view the activity and found it to be consistent. What we did is we conveyed the issues, questions, comments from the committee in, essentially the cover memo staff report that accompanies the auditor, excuse me, the committee's report. So just to share from like logistics and process, because this item went to the finance subcommittee prior to going to the council, I included in your packet, right after my little, that's on page 9, the draft of the city council staff report that we brought to the finance subcommittee. It just had a little bit more discussion and narrative and context for the issues. There was a robust discussion at the subcommittee. Subcommittee provided feedback and then suggested that in the report that was going to go on to the council, we kind of make sort of kind of just a reference to some issues that had come up. So we can talk about that if we want, but the bottom line is, in the memo that we prepared for this meeting, starting on page 6 and 7, the first item had to do with, I think, a really valid question, which is how is a Citizens Oversight Committee charged with oversight of a tax measure that is a general purpose tax, so that money gets dumped into the general fund and spent any way the council implies, if you will, through the approval of the budget. Or is there an expectation of any more robust review specific to how did the city spend Measure E 3/4 cent sales tax and the Measure R 1/4 cent sales tax? Good news is the subcommittee, which is made up of Mayor Kate and Council Member Eli Hill, basically said, hey, that's a really good question. How are they supposed to do that? But they went on to at least opine that it wasn't necessarily the council's intent to, either, comb through the entire general fund budget, or because it's a general tax that we would, account for it like as a special revenue fund, and because we don't track the expenditures. They basically said that if there's need for clarification in the bylaws about what the expectation is, that staff should work with the committee and potentially suggest any revisions to the bylaw if, as currently constituted, the bylaws seem to suggest that there's an expectation of level of oversight that is impractical or difficult to execute in practice. That was number 1. I'll just go through the other 2 real quick. On the issue of the paramedic tax, again, the context here is the paramedic tax is the one quote-unquote voter-approved tax measure, which is currently not under the purview of this committee, at least in its formational charter. The reason being is this committee was formed again in 2022 after the passage of Measure R, and the council said, well, do we want to keep adding advisory committees every time a measure is passed? The thinking, I think, appropriate was to consolidate the oversight under one body, which is what this committee does. The paramedic tax never had an oversight clause in the ordinance, which is interesting because that meant that there was no oversight. Doesn't mean you couldn't have an oversight committee, so that's the question. But the charter and the council resolution that established the updated charter for the committee, does imply that this committee will be oversight of what used to be, the library oversight, the cannabis oversight, the Measure E, the Measure R, and any future voter-approved tax measure. So at least when we had the conversation with the subcommittee, and on our planning calendar somewhere is the prospect of potentially needing to bring the paramedic tax back to the voters because it has a set cap. So heretofore, we're not getting any additional revenue in the cost that it supports. The thinking was that if, but when the paramedic tax comes back before the voters, that, and were it to be approved, that the thinking is that there would be an oversight provision built into that ordinance, which would then, and because that could happen as early as 2026, they said, let's just leave the paramedic tax where it is for now, and potentially bring it under the purview following an upcoming election where the paramedic tax may be brought forward. And that dovetails nicely into the third topic that came up. And we did prepare some information in this packet related to Measure P, the new library community center parcel tax that was approved via Citizens Initiative on the November 2024 ballot, which does have an oversight provision in it. And it was pretty clear and consistent with what the thinking has been, that without needing to make any, formal edict to this effect, that the expectation of the city council is that this committee will in fact serve as the oversight committee for Measure P. So with that in mind, along with some of the other information that we provided in another agenda item, while we don't have actual revenues and expenditures for Measure P because it just started this fiscal year, we did include some information about Measure P and at least the budget for this year. So we kind of tiptoeing into Measure P, and at this meeting next year, we'll be going through presumably the what the Measure P. But that essentially was the feedback from the subcommittee. Part of what makes it a little bit difficult to have this conversation is that both the mayor and the city manager, as has been the practice, then in turn requested that the committee's report to the council, to the full council, went to the council on a consent calendar. So there's a staff report, right, and your report included, but they review and approve the consent calendar, as a whole without any real discussion, barring potentially public comment, which there was none on this item. So council feedback is implied by their approval of the report when it went to consent. So that's my take on
I appreciate the overview. I do have one question regarding the paramedic tax. The current tax, when does it expire?
So it does not have an expiration date. So that, unlike all the others, so I have my little cheat sheet on all the, so it was approved in 2010. It does not have an expiration date. However, the tax rate was set up to a maximum rate, and which gave it a fair amount of headroom. And the measure also said that as opposed to being tied to an index like a CPI or some other annual inflationary adjustment, that tax shall be adjusted, I'm paraphrasing, annually by the city council as deemed necessary to basically implement the intent of the use of the paramedic tax. So it was through the budget process. They also had to pass a resolution that said that the budget that they're approving for emergency medical and the portion of that budget that is to be funded from the paramedic tax requires a tax rate of X, and that's how they would set the tax rate. But the ordinance set a maximum cap, which we actually hit in fiscal year 2024. It's either just last year or 2 years. And so right now that tax is basically not able to be increased. I would say that you're not asking this question, but I'll offer it anyway, that right now, from inception, the paramedic tax funds roughly 27% of the personnel costs and roughly the same percentage, I believe, of the non-personnel costs associated with not the fire department as a whole, but the emergency EMS emergency medical response. Now granted, all of our firefighters are firefighter, EMT, paramedics, so the staff costs. But at inception, the initial rate was set and it happened to be about 27%. So that's the ratio that has been maintained and increasing over time. But now that it's at a cap, absent council action or voter approval to revisit the cap and or a fundamental restructuring of the fire department budget, the tax will start to contribute a smaller proportionate share of the overall budget going forward. And so that's the issue that prompts at least consideration of bringing it forward.
Thanks.
It generates, I should tell you, at least in the 24-5 budget, we can look at it when we go to the next agenda item, but I have here in my notes, the 24-25 budget was $5.4 million.
I'm sorry, I is a tax on,
It is a parcel tax, so there's it's per residential unit for residential properties, and it's a per square foot of commercial and industrial. They pay non-residential. Don't ask me how we handle vacant lots.
all right, I will not.
I can get you that. And
How
basically,
difficult would
yeah.
it be to segregate the costs associated with paramedic activity versus fire department activity? Or are they just so integrated that it would
well,
either be too hard or not
we
worthwhile?
do somewhat in the sense that the general fund, well, the paramedic tax is a special tax, and so it's collected separately.
Right.
We're splitting the cost separately. If I'm hearing your question, it's like, how easy to segregate? They do have an emergency medical, and not on the agenda, but we just implemented a new financial system, a new ERP, and we just redid the entire chart of accounts, specifically with an eye towards how can our financial system better support the tracking, reporting, management information that we would hope we're using to manage our affairs. And so I think we do a pretty good job on the emergency medical. And we're going to be doing even a better job now that we've transitioned, once we grow into the new financial system and take advantage of it. What gets a little tricky on that in practice is that all of our firefighters and line staff are firefighter, paramedic, EMTs. So you really get down to tracking calls. Like if it's a fire call versus a medical call, and that gets a little cumbersome in the accounting methodology. We have calls for service and the type of calls, so it's usually a percentage of based on call volumes and nature of the calls.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting it's necessarily worthwhile to try to segregate those costs, even if it's an arbitrary mechanism.
Yeah.
But I'm just, looking forward, assuming that we do, that there is a increase to the cap and that paramedic tax falls under our purview. Just trying to think ahead towards what we would actually be reviewing. The revenue side's easy-ish. The expense side would be the challenge, and this is, Caleb, kind of where your head has been on a couple of these things. But what are the expenses really, and are the revenues from the paramedic tax in fact being spent appropriately? So
I'd say it's a little easier in the case of the paramedic because arguably we spend more than the paramedic tax on emergency medical. So from, a strict definition, hey, if this 5 million was spent on this, was it spent consistent with the intent of the measure? Sort of secondary, the city might have spent, 15 million or 20 million on, it wouldn't be that much, but about 80% of the calls, 70 to 80% of the calls responded to by fire department are medical. And it has been that way for a while, and it tends to be punching upward
as we age.
aging population, hopefully better building stock and fire prevention. A little funny anecdote, you have to stop me because that's too many of them. I worked in another city and we hired one of these consultants to do analysis of fire station location and calls, and we gave them the call data, and I get a email from them that says, "College town, huh?" How'd you know? It's like the profile of the call, time of day and types of call, time of day, day of week. It's like, that's college town. So they're all,
2 a.m. Friday night and Saturday night.
anyway.
I had a quick question. Just to go back to the Measure E and Measure R, to kind of close the loop on this whole thing. So I understand where we're at and why, and I think, it makes sense with being unable to review all the general fund expenditures and that it's approved by city council. I get that, but I guess my question is, so going forward, is there a mechanism to ensure that future measures, the money ends up all where it can be tracked and not in the general fund? Or how do we ensure that this doesn't continue happening? So there's not oversight over the expenditures on the measures.
Okay. I thought you were gonna ask a different question, but I don't have a good answer.
Well, is it advertised when they put the measures out to vote on them that they will or will not be tracked by?
Well, see, that's the question I thought you were gonna ask. It
Okay.
seems the question is the next time, and there will be a renewal measure for E and R, or R both. Question is, should that ballot measure and that ordinance that the voters have an oversight language in it that is there because it's good to have those in the ballot measures if it's not something that can actually be, the voters presumably have an assumption, presumption
Right.
on that.
Right.
I think that's a good question. The tough part of what you were just asking, and if it takes me more than 30 seconds to find this, I will backtrack. But I did, and I was going to include a link, and as a follow-up, maybe I'll send this out to the committee, the actual copies of the ordinances that enacted all of these measures. The Measure E, the Measure R, in fact, will say voter-approved oversight committee, ordinances and bylaws. So here's an example. The transaction and use tax for Measure R basically says that the purpose of this is, if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. I have to leave there. But basically that it will be used for, public safety, streets and roads, parks, recreation, library, general government services, and anything else that the council deems necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It's pretty broad.
Including but not limited to. So because it's just that
Yeah.
broad of a measure, that's the crux of the oversight. So honestly, unless the city spends the money without budget authority or on something that's unethical or, against the law.
Yeah, it's what the people voted for and it goes in the general fund and that's fine.
Well, and sort of the intention, if I'm remembering right, is to isolate those funds from state control. That gives us a source of funding that the state can't take away.
Not exactly. I mean, there is idea, they'll put in the ballot measures, these funds can't be taken by the state because
Right.
that way, local dollars stay local is sort of a recurring theme.
Yeah.
And a voter approved measure is different than property and sales tax. Because property and sales tax, the legislature has a history of reallocating.
Right.
I think the real purpose, although at least a different perspective on your question, is that just at a very basic level, there's general purpose taxes and there's special taxes. And general purpose taxes, can be used on anything, but very importantly, are passed with the 50% voter threshold, a special tax has to be is restricted for use, and it needs to say what it's restricted for, and then those require a 2/3 vote.
Mhm.
So sometimes they'll put a special tax on the ballot and craft it in a way, in part, to be able to get under a 50% +1 threshold.
Yeah.
As opposed to the added burden, if you
Right.
will, of a 2/3 threshold. But most local taxes that are established locally are now pretty well protected from the state. But then again, we've been proven wrong before.
And I also wonder, I think this is related to your question, right? If the purpose of the tax is to be additive, right, saying, okay, we currently spend this much on fixing potholes. And, we as the population of San Rafael would like us to spend another X on potholes.
Right.
Because the whole fungibility of money. And if it's not intended to be additive, but to,
Mhm.
um,
So that's where you will often see what we call non-supplanting
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
That basically says, oh, if you're gonna pass a public safety tax for police and fire, this is on top of the baseline budget that they have now, because you can't do a special tax, raise $6-7 million and then go in and reduce $5 million of general fund to go, because then you used a special tax to fund potholes.
right.
And you use public safety as the making the case.
Yeah.
For getting the money.
So I guess that's kind of our job, is to watch the funds.
But that's very hard to do.
It's hard to do, but I mean, there are taxes and measures with non-supplanting. The state, gas tax has supplanting language, SB1 for transportation. So you get X allocation, but we have to report every year to the state controller that we are maintaining, the baseline 2020 funding level of local funds, and that the additional dollars are not supplanting.
Isn't D non-supplanting?
Not really. I haven't quite looked at that, those potentials. But now that I found it, just because we went there, measure R in this case shall be deposited into the general fund and used for all general governmental purposes, which may include but are not limited to disaster, health, emergency preparedness, repairing potholes and streets, maintaining 911 response time, city parks, playgrounds, crime prevention, preserving local services and programs for youth, families, seniors, homeless, and other city services. The tax imposed by this chapter is intended to be and is a general tax, the proceeds of which are to be spent as the city council shall, in its discretion, from time to time, determine.
Is it possible that we could add to the charter something along the lines of a review and comment on future ballot measures or measures to be able to say, like, make a recommendation to include language or remove language that it will or will not be covered before it goes, just to help clarify this before it takes effect?
That's a good question that I can't answer.
That's a great ask.
It's a good ask.
Because otherwise we just get in a situation where afterwards it's too late and you're like, all right, well, catch it on the next one.
Yeah, so the only thing that's, I saw this, I kind of chuckled every time, in the article that establishes the bylaws, there are two bullets that says the committee shall not, which is have any budgetary decision authority, shall not allocate financial resources, shall not make budget or service level recommendations of the council, but then say on how a tax measure could be better worded to provide for oversight. And then the committee shall not have authority to direct, nor shall it direct city staff or city officials. But you can ask.
Okay, what's the, is an appropriate mechanism to ask to draft some language with recommended inclusion in an updated charter?
What we could do is, in the annual report that presumably we'll be discussing at the follow-up meeting, and kind of a 2-meeting sort of cadence here. Robust discussion, unaudited, and then we seal it all with audited, and then the report. That would be a something to include. And I would put it in the report, not just in the staff memos.
Okay.
That way in your report, if there's some specific language, you can say the committee recommends, have to see what the wording looks like, but otherwise we'll be having this conversation year after year.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Back to the chair. Something.
All right, so we are working our way through the agenda. We have discussed several of the financials related to the various measures. Trying to think if we've really missed any. I mean, I have questions on some of them, but
So can I back you up a second? Do we want to spend, does the committee want to spend any time on item 5? Or is that self-explanatory? This was added to the agenda in response to, not response, but as a middle ground. We talked last time about, with E&R in particular, general fund. How is the general fund budget set? What is the general fund budget set? Some of these other tax measures, whether it's paramedic or Measure D, the context for these tax measures within the overall city budget. So we absolutely don't need to spend any time on it, but we did prepare just a couple of handouts that just talks a little bit about the overall city budget and where these funds fit in the budget. Caleb, I think you had also asked, in the context of the council's annual adoption of the budget, is there any direction provided with respect to the expenditures of Measure E and Measure R? Because it's one thing to say that it met the intent of the ordinance, and another thing to say in 24-25, the city council approved funding for X, Y, and Z. And so there's excerpts in this handout from the data is mostly 25-26 because it's the most current, but I included some excerpts from the council's action adopting the 24-25 budget to the extent that they called out funding appropriations for funds under the committee's purview, as much as an example of how that happens.
Yep.
But that's just purely informational action.
I read through it. I appreciate it. I don't have any questions on it in regards to this committee.
yeah, I mean, I have several questions related to the budget, but they're not really relevant to this committee, unfortunately.
If I could take one moment, if folks have it either in front of them or have access to it, I could fit it too. I did want to just show you that on previous call out that on page 17 and 18 is sort of a presentation of the revenues and expenditure appropriations by fund. And of course, we talked about the general fund up in the very top, kind of a gold highlight. If you go down the list for future reference, Fund 210, that's your paramedic EMS fund. Fund 216 is the cannabis, which is Measure G. And then down below, Fund 215 is the what is now Measure D. It used to be earlier measure, and that was renewed. And if on the second page of this spreadsheet, it should be, under capital project funds, there's Fund 420, which is Measure E, but again, this is just the portion of the Measure E proceeds that are transferred from the general fund to Fund 420 for essential facilities, net of the debt.
Shouldn't 420 be cannabis?
Yeah, but we went with the 400. That's a good one. And then for the first time this year, we have established Measure P is the last one on this list, and it is Fund 430. Measure P for the library project, and we can just talk about it. So, but that just gives you an idea of, out of the 13 million in capital funds and the 18.8 million in special revenue funds, these are the voter approved components.
And Measure D is sunsetting next year, is that correct?
Measure D is sunsetting at the end of this current fiscal year.
Mhm.
And so, yes, absent any, it would require both action by the city council to put it back on, before the voters, and it would require approval of the voters for it to continue to generate 1.2 million and change, after the current fiscal year.
Well, I do want to ask a couple questions and
Okay.
please answer them quickly if appropriate.
I will.
So looking at page 17, line 001, general fund available balance
Yeah.
decreases from 24.9 million down to 18 million. Is there a target? Is there a rule of thumb? Is there a goal in terms of how big the general fund balance reserve should be?
There's both. There's rule of thumb, but more importantly, city council does have a general fund reserve policy. It was asked that they update it in conjunction with last fiscal year 24-5 budget. So it's now roughly 15%. So quickly, it's kind of broken into two pieces. It used to be 10%, and rule of thumb, which, GFOA, government finance officers and others, they'll say, 3 months of operating, which translates into like 17%. Every city is different, and those are good rules of thumb, but you should be setting it based on what meets the needs of your situation. What the current reserve policy has a 10% emergency reserve, which is sort of your, oh, we didn't expect that to happen, or emergencies, you need to have it. The additional 5% to get to 15 is treated as a reserve for, say, economic uncertainty. So if property and sales tax primarily don't materialize as planned, you have a buffer to at least get through the budget. So I don't go to council in December and go, sales tax is $4 million short, where do you want to cut? Right? It gives you a buffer to at least get through the next budget cycle. Okay, but we're at 15%.
And again, these are budget questions, and I realize there is a separate mechanism for reviewing budgets and a separate forum for that. But I couldn't help but notice the city council and city clerk budgets are both up over 30% year over year. And the finance department budget is down. And as a person with a finance background, I'm never in favor of cutting a finance budget.
So let me just say with that, and maybe we can each year incorporate this overview or provide it when, part of it is also, Chair Freed, a function of sort of reshuffling. There's a lot of costs in the finance department that are really non-departmental, like debt service payments and lease payments. So they've been in finance, so it makes it look like finance has this big budget, but it's really not our operating budget. So some of it, as we were going into the new ERP and looking at the new chart of accounts, is putting budgets where they should be, as opposed to where they've always been.
No, that's fair. And I understand that challenge, yeah. Another area, maybe you can speak to how clean these numbers are.
Yeah.
Account 501, parking services.
Yes.
Is it overly simplistic to say we spend $4.1 million a year on parking enforcement and only raise 4.8 million a year in fines?
Yes, overly simplistic. Because this also accounts for the fact that the city operates a number of parking lots and parking garages. So it's all revenue from the parking lots, not just fines. It's not just parking enforcement.
Oh.
So there's debt service on parking structures that
Okay.
those need a lot more capital improvements than the fund can support. I will say that it is the single enterprise fund within the city, so the intent of the parking fund is that it is supposed to operate as a quote unquote business and enterprise with the revenues and expenditures. So the general fund should not be subsidizing the parking fund. And we also shouldn't be going into a parking fund that has a surplus and, scraping dollars to do potholes unless they're in a parking lot.
If there's a surplus, what is the excess? How do you balance that?
Okay. Two ways. One, it should be doing it over time, right? Not year to year.
Okay,
But the other tenet of an enterprise fund in a public sector setting is that we are really precluded from charging more than the cost.
Hmm.
We're not in it to make a profit. At least the intent.
so the fees would be adjusted.
Yeah, so but you don't want the fees to do this. It's like, oh, we have to replace an elevator. So you kind of have to have a long-term view and have rates that support the operating capital and maintenance and debt.
Got it.
Of the funds. All right.
Thank you. That's helpful. And that was all the questions I had regarding the budget. So thanks for that. Any other budget related comments?
Found it very interesting though, and thank you for it.
Yeah, and there's not much more than that in the documents that the council gets, and we're working on having a little bit more budget documents that provide a little bit more information about what the funds are for and blah, 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 blah. But anyway.
All right. So I also have questions on Measure P, and
Okay.
this is not related to current year revenue and current year spending, so perhaps it's outside the purview of this group as it stands. But my understanding is that there's no, all right, so it's a per square foot parcel tax, Measure P.
Building square footage.
Yep. And with some sort of escalator clause. So
There's actually, I don't think there's an escalator. I think it just sets a flat.
oh, really? Okay. My mistake then, sorry. So, there's a revenue stream
Yep.
that is coming.
Yep.
There's no is there an expiration date on that revenue stream?
Indirectly. So it's gonna generate about 6.2, 6.3 million until we actually get this year's receipts, and then we'll recalibrate, but that's
Sure.
what we estimated when they set the rate. And there is a duration provision in the measure that says that it will remain in effect. I believe, I'd say this, don't quote me, but it's basically, 30 years or following the last bond payment on the debt that is presumed to be entered into to build the project, whichever is longer.
Okay.
So if we issue debt in 45 years, you'll have a very long tax measure.
Yeah, and what I'm getting
Not
to,
the intent.
of course, yeah, but what I'm getting to is at what point will there be a budget for this project? And how do we do the quick math on,
Yeah.
okay, 6 million a year revenue paying off a 80 million or $100 million project or 100,
We've done the assumptions about interest rates and everything
Yeah.
else, the 6.2 million and the reserve requirements for debt reserve, can probably support plus or minus $90 million bond. We still don't have this year and next year is money's in the budget just to do some preliminary planning, but eventually you get the design, then you get the engineer's estimate. If somebody up with a $90 million project, we can probably proceed and go to debt. If it's going to be more than that, then the question is, okay, how much have we maybe collected? We're going to be spending some of it, but if you set aside $5 million a year and you get to 10 or 15, we're easily 3-4 years away from, breaking ground and awarding contracts. So, funding plan to support the preferred project is going to have to take into account the capacity of the bond or the tax measure to support.
So from a practical standpoint, if the people who are planning this project really want to do something a little bit nicer, a little bit bigger, and all of a sudden we're talking 110 million or 120 million, what's the mechanism and who are the players that would say, no, we don't have the money won't be there?
City council.
City council. Okay.
So we're a long ways away from a budget and report for that.
Well, for the project, what I, a little bit of segue at the end of the budget item and at the end of this packet, we did appropriate in this year's budget. I think it might be the very last page.
1.5 million capital and
Uh,
105
yeah,
million
yeah,
operating.
so out of the 6.3 million that we expect to collect, we just put a 1.5 million as kind of seed money for initial. I mean, we've already actually hired a project management firm, I believe, and then there's a staff position operating as half of a capital projects project manager that will be spending presumably 50% time on this project and 50% on other projects that are not funded from P. So at our meeting next fall, we'll be looking at, and the council may amend this budget during the course of the year if need be. We were thinking that was a pretty conservative estimate. I'm hopefully we'll be spending that this year. But it'll be a while before we're.
Bless you.
Once we get into the project, hopefully we'll be spending on proceeds, and primarily the Measure P is going to be going to debt service. On bonds.
Makes sense.
Makes our job easy.
Yeah. I should note, because it already has come up in a recent council item, that Measure P says that the funds shall be used exclusively for the planning, design, construction of a new library and community center. The proceeds can also be used for improvements at existing branch libraries, provided that doing so does not hinder Measure P's ability to deliver the project. So, well, it's hard to say that it would unless you're spending a lot of money on branch libraries for what the reason we just said.
We're not gonna be spending $10 million on the branches.
We could.
Yeah.
I mean,
But theoretically, we just, yeah, but that's the framework of Measure P. Okay,
it's helpful.
all right. You've been texting Sean back and forth?
Yeah, he can only hear us.
He can hear us.
Yeah.
We can't elevate him to a panelist.
No. He got the same ear as you.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We will do our best Sean plate impersonation. Maybe he can text you if we say something it's not. Anyways, that does get us to the sixth year.
Yes. So we have reviewed all of the various measures, DE, DGE, R, and P? I feel like we have had some discussion of each of those.
I got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, measure D, page 37.
Yep.
This is the summary financials.
Yep.
Seems like the biggest delta between the budget and the unaudited financials is the equipment line item.
Yes.
Budgeted 490K, spent 104,000. Everything else kind of lines up. That one kind of stuck out to me, and I was curious, did something just push? We're not going to spend it until next year, or what?
That's exactly what happened, and I was actually asked to call this out. If you go to page 24 of your packet, this is the excerpt from the funding that was requested and approved as part of the budget for Measure D. The automated material handling and shelving project for the current library with all the renovation work that was pushed off.
Yep.
And in fact, I'm pretty sure when you looked at that page 37, when you look at the amended budget, that 491 includes bringing forward
Yep.
the funding from the prior year. The
Yep.
adopted budget was not quite 490, it's not the whole amount, but the adopted budget was a lot less than close to 400,000 was carried over.
Yep, great.
So that's what that is.
Thank you.
Good question.
Okay.
I had just one more question. There's a
Sure.
line item in, thanks for making all the improvements to all these line items, categorizing the detail on the personnel, et cetera. It's really helpful. Makes
Thank you,
it
Alexis.
makes it easy. Appreciate all those changes.
Yeah.
There's a vendor facilities by design that has a line item for a lot of the moves, it seems like the temporary office
Yeah.
moves.
Yeah.
Those made sense. The only one I wanted to check on was there's a Baker and Taylor vendor, and I think that's for books. I just wanted to double check that that's what that was for. I wasn't familiar
You
with
happen to know
Baker
what
and
page?
Taylor.
Do you know what-
Yeah, I think we're on. The Baker and Taylor starts 59.
Got it.
They're just large dollar amounts. I just wanted to double check that that's what it
It
was. The line description for a lot of them just is kind of gibberish. ADSB 33.
Document.
What does Baker and Taylor do?
I'd say that is a good question. There's a lot of Baker and Taylor.
Well, all the other ones are publications that are surrounding it.
Says Baker and Taylor's books.
Yes.
And just FYI, they
Okay.
are going out of business. They are the oldest one of the oldest booksellers in the country. They're starting in the 1820s in Hartford, got bought out, moved to Charlotte, and they have now gone bankrupt. And they early October headlines saying they are ceasing operations. So in the future, you won't see Baker and Taylor.
We can get in on the fire sale.
We hope not,
before
anyway.
they-
We hope we won't, yes. Thank you. That's exactly. So, I mean, who knows if there's enough for somebody to buy them out, get the remnants, but that's what they do. And they're
Got
a
it.
whole line company.
I call Sean.
Thank you.
Just talk. to
Mhm.
you. I'm just gonna see if you can hear us better that way without interfering.
The only other one I had was Measure G. It's page 81.
Okay.
And it's similar, just checking on a vendor. It's called Joint Venture Silicon. Or- Yeah. CoStar Real Estate Southeast. I just wasn't sure what this exactly was.
I was gonna ask about that too. Well, CoStar is a warehouse of commercial real estate.
Hey, Sean, can you hear me?
It's like the MLS for commercial.
Right. Okay.
So I was gonna ask about that too. I'm in real estate and I was wondering if that was for direct, like cannabis programs or, finding, retailers or.
I'm
what is it?
surprised that would come through Joint Venture Silicon Valley, though. I know those guys are basically a think tank down in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you mute your?
Yeah, it was what, like $7,000, right?
Sean, can you hear us?
I can.
I just
Can you-
dialed you up on Teams.
And I answered on my phone accidentally, so now, yeah. Anyway, I'm here for you. What do you need?
No, it's okay. The last question that came up, I have a thought on it, but I don't know. There's a question on Measure G. It's funny, we actually have a budget, but I'm not showing did we actually spend any of that money? On joint ventures, Silicon under Measure G. CoStar Real Estate.
Honestly, I saw that one and I was kind of hoping that
I know they spent $7,000.
Stacy or would be there to
Yeah, let me,
clarify.
I'm gonna take a educated guess, but I'm gonna follow up and get the real answer. There are kind of like property management related services associated with sort of the parcels where the licensees for the cannabis business are and what zoning they're able to operate under. when businesses come in expressing potential interest in a cannabis license, it's sort of like, what is the, zoning planning / real estate map look like? And so, I mean, we have a number of contracts with entities that basically provide, different, maps and data sets. And I'm thinking that could be, but I am absolutely gonna need to check on that. I believe that this is the annual recurring expense, so nothing that I will need to. So we got that noted.
Is
Yeah.
just assuming that we won't see each other again until December when it's time to approve
Yeah.
this, is there a way that we can review that prior to that meeting, just to understand that?
Sure, I can provide information offline, and then one of the things that we have done in our December meetings is we've had some follow-up on some questions that came up that we weren't able to handle at the meeting, but no, you don't have to wait until our next meeting to get that answer.
Okay.
Thanks. And I think that'll also be, who are they and what services do they provide?
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
I have one additional question on Measure G. The transfers out to the SAFE team spent a lot less, or the transfer were a lot less than had been budgeted for 24-25, and then the budget for 25-26 bounces back up to 550. What's the best way to look at that? And what are the sources of revenue to support the SAFE team above and beyond, or are there any sources of revenue above and beyond what comes out of Measure G?
Okay, so let me take a stab at that, and then I know Sean.
You can hear, yeah, I've got it if you can hear me.
Well, why don't you go? All right, why don't you go for it then? I'll save my
Okay,
voice.
for the fiscal 25, you can almost see what happened. We were transferring monthly and then realized in September that we received quite a bit of opioid settlement money. In fact, it was about $550,000. So that's where we ended up. We reversed it and waited to the end of the year to do the rest of the transfer. Now I have a projection. I have all of the like all the different settlements. There's about 9 of them or something.
Yeah.
And all the payouts that are projected for out to 2032. And now this was the biggest year. Now we're looking at maybe getting 150,000. So
Sean, let me.
That's where back up to the 550 because it does cost about 700,000 to run the SAFE team per year.
So let me back up a second for the SAFE team.
Yeah.
We're in the 3rd year of a 3-year pilot. It's $700,000 a year is the current contract. When the council approved the SAFE program, there was sort of, what do we call it? Like this, waterfall of funding. So the first tranche was funding that came from the ARPA, post-COVID Federal Recovery Act, which was funding that was provided to the city to make up for lost revenue. And so that was used, a portion of it was used to get the SAFE team. And then, as Sean said, the second tranche, because that's gone, is opioid settlement money, which has been very volatile and unpredictable. So we've been budgeting $700,000 a year, with the idea being that this fund would then, SAFE team is in the general fund, we'd be transferring $700,000 a year. Sean, I don't know, in the 3 years that we've been here, we've never transferred $700,000 of cannabis because we haven't needed it. So in the 24-25 budget, you see, we budgeted a $700,000 transfer, but as Sean said, we only needed 150. So in this year's budget for the current fiscal year, we reduced the estimated transfer from 7 to 550. And time will tell whether we need that or not. The point being that any funding that's collected net of, administering the license program goes to fund balance and we transfer money needed for safe, the balance is sitting in the Measure G fund balance. And I think we noted in the staff report that I think it was in February, the council also reduced what was originally a 4% tax, but when they enacted it, they set the tax at, it had a cap of 4, they set it at 2, it's now 1%. So we're only collecting 110,000 in revenue. So it's a long answer to your question.
No, that's helpful. Thanks.
We are working on a funding plan to see how to extend the 3-year pilot program for another 2, if not 3+ years. City applied for, received a grant. So we're seeing if the grant and opioid will cover most of it, and how much of the cannabis fund can we rely on to extend the program.
Other questions on Measure G or any of the other special measures? Yeah, I'm satisfied myself, but I guess this is our opportunity for final questions.
He answered all of them.
So is the next step to discuss schedule of upcoming meetings?
Yeah, it'd be great if we could find a
Those are really good at that.
date that works. Welcome to the doodle poll works a little bit.
Let's try to have one now.
The other thing is because we meet so infrequently, I think it's helpful to have everybody, so we kind of go the extra yard. If we could have a meeting with 3, it's a quorum, but that defeats the purpose of folks that are volunteering their time to serve and participate. So,
When will the final be ready?
actually pretty soon. Probably go to the council right now, as early as first week in December, so anytime, the biggest issue is just we have the holidays with Thanksgiving, but anytime after December 1st. 2 years ago, we started the conversation here and we ended up meeting in February. And it is what it is.
Yeah.
If we do a doodle and get it out early enough now for that first 2 weeks of December, I think we could find a date.
I would hope
I
so.
believe in this committee to
Okay.
figure this out.
Okay. So we would be looking at those first couple of weeks before we get in, I guess we have 3 weeks of runway in December. That works. Are there any dates that don't work for folks so that I won't need to include them?
I'm having knee surgery on the 3rd, so I probably need a few days
Okay.
to recover.
3rd of November.
December.
Yeah. Okay.
And Thanksgiving is always not a great time.
Yeah, no, it would probably be, consensus, we'd probably do like a week, 2 weeks after the 3rd then. We'll just avoid that first week in December. We'll do a doodle poll for,
Yeah, like starting the 10th or something would be great.
okay.
I tend to be busy on Mondays and Thursdays, but
Okay.
maybe just best way is just to do it through a doodle poll and just
Okay.
throw some dates out there.
And the only dates I tend to avoid is gonna be, a federal holiday or Monday city council meeting nights, so that we're not.
If you could avoid Tuesday planning commission nights, that'd be good.
Okay. All right, so sounds like.
Sounds like Saturdays are.
Wednesday's a good night. Also avoid Friday evenings.
I
for-
can't do the 10th, but I'm out that one. I see
Are
that.
Wednesdays generally a reasonable day for people?
So,
Yeah, but that 10th is a
figure it out.
Wednesday. I can't do it.
Yeah, fair, but just generally speaking.
Generally speaking, yes. Thursdays are also, but you can't do Thursdays, right?
I tend to have a conflict, but not,
Conflict, okay.
All right, you'll see a doodle poll. We'll
Yep.
actually get it out this week. So that way we can at
That's
least,
great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
know if we have a target date to go to. With that, we may be on that adjournment, and I will look up the two questions that you asked.
Thank you.
now and then. Okay, we're good. All right, good.
does anyone move to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
Perfect. Sean, we are adjourned.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye, Sean.
Bye, Sean.
I'm so quick to get out. Can we shut that too?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Alex.
Wait for the city clerk to say the video didn't record, so you have to have. a whole
Probably.
meeting.
We can cruise through it. We can do it faster.
Yeah.
I do appreciate, you guys' time.